Hello, and welcome to Fact Schmacks. It's the podcast good enough to get you a C.
Minus.
My name's Matt, and I've got a story to tell you.
My name's Kev. I have a story to interrupt.
Hey, Kevin.
Hi, Matt.
How's your few weeks been?
Well, it's been lacking of Fact Schmacks. A little disappointingly. We've had a bit of a... we've had a run.
We've had a hiatus.
We've had a hiatus. Hopefully the last one for a bit.
Hopefully we're not taking any breaks for a bit. I've been using my time productively.
I doubt that.
My son has decided he really likes movies and he going to the movies. So we went to see a movie last week. It was The Bad Guys, which I'd never even heard of, but it's a series of books that he's loving.
Okay.
And so Top Gun's the big thing right now, right?
Huge.
I've never seen the original.
What?
Yeah, I never saw the original. I think we've talked about this on the podcast before.
Sure, and I haven't remembered.
I figured, well, at least he shouldn't suffer because of this. So
he should grow up to be a man.
So we're going to see it tomorrow. We've even got those D-box seats.
Oh, nice.
So we'll see how that goes.
I love the theater. Love going to the theater.
The movie we went to see, we were the only people there. It was great.
That's the best time to see a movie. It's like the off times.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So last night I watched Top Gun for the first time.
Oh.
And I have thoughts.
Yeah, you're 100% my goose.
Absolutely. I hope that doesn't mean I...
it means what you think it is.
Yeah.
Or what you think it does. Yeah. You're going into the canopy, buddy. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's a bummer.
When this crashes.
That is possibly the most homoerotic movie I've ever seen in my entire life.
Okay. Hold up. First of all, you love and espouse wrestling constantly.
Yes.
There's no way Top Gun is more homoerotic than wrestling.
It's not a movie.
Yeah, right. You got me there.
I did get you there.
What about Brokeback Mountain?
Yeah, but it knows what it is.
Okay, fair enough. So what's your reasoning here?
Oh, the volleyball
scene. Yeah.
The volleyball scene. The simmering tension between Iceman and Maverick through the whole movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know Val Kilmer
I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was super great. I had a lot of fun watching it, but holy shit, it is.
Val Kilmer didn't like Tom Cruise.
Oh, really?
So that was like a legit thing. Yeah, Tom Cruise was probably Tom Cruising it up. I saw a really good thing with James Corden and Tom Cruise for promoting the new movie where Tom Cruise takes James Corden flying. So Tom Cruise can actually fly, and he flies a P-51 Mustang and then a jet. I can't remember what the jet was, but it was a 2-seater, kind of like a trainer jet.
Yeah.
It was good. It was funny. I laughed. I am a huge flying aviation nerd. I was an air cadet as a kid. I used to love going to air shows, and I still think, when I see a jet go by, it gives me a semi. I love it. I'm wow, that thing is amazing.
Before that little uncomfortable bit of trivia, you dropped another bit of trivia, and I just have to wonder, do you have any more? Do you have any more of them facts and perhaps a schmacked?
Well, I do. So, full disclosure, we're gonna have probably the lamest, weakest Fact Schmacks game ever. Because you know what? I was hungry for a win. When I woke up from my nap this afternoon / early evening, I thought, I need a win today. But the old brain wasn't working. So I did what I normally do. I ate some ice cream. And it got me thinking. There's a lot of ice cream things we could talk about.
Okay.
So, we got some ice cream themed facts or schmacks.
You seem positively giddy.
Actually, I kind of am, because It's interesting, Baskin Robbins claims 51 flavors, but I've found some flavors that probably aren't on their menu.
Okay.
So, fact or schmacked, Matt?
Yeah.
There's a toothpaste-based ice cream flavor, and it's not mint chocolate chip.
Does it? Okay. I don't expect you to actually know this, but is it like actual tooth? Like, will it clean your teeth?
Fact or schmacked, Matt? There is a hot dog flavored ice cream flavor. Hot dog ice cream.
A hot dog, hot diggity dog. Okay.
You got any questions about that there, Mr. Inquisitor?
Yeah, but it's more of a societal thing.
Let's hear them.
No, I mean, I don't have any questions for you. I questioned the society that, spawns hot dog flavored ice cream.
That would allow such a thing to happen?
Exactly. Such an affront to God and the laws of nature.
Now, this next one here is not so much of a flavor, so much as what's in it. The flavor is called champagne, but the real kick from this ice cream is it's laced with Viagra. So, what do you think? Which one gets you harder, the hot dog or the Viagra? You seem like a hot dog man to me.
Okay. I'm gonna go with my classic strategy of vote for the one that I least want to be true. For whatever reason that is.
Okay.
Now, while I do think that hot dog flavored ice cream is an affront against man and nature itself,
okay,
I think someone's crazy enough to have done it. Toothpaste flavored ice cream, though. That isn't like candy cane ice cream. I don't think so. Who would want toothpaste flavored anything?
Well,
I think
like
that's
soap flavored gum. Remember those?
Thrills?
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually kind of weirdly enjoyed them.
Well, there you go. So there goes your theory.
No, I think
it's make that your final answer.
I'm gonna make it the toothpaste flavored.
That's your final answer. God damn it! Yeah, I made that up.
The other two were just. I wanted to believe them so much.
Could you imagine just
champagne? Hey,
yeah,
laced with
Viagra.
Hey, honey, I'm gonna eat this ice cream and I'll be hard. And
I wonder how
long it takes. I don't know.
Maybe one of our listeners out there has tried it. I often consider my erection dysfunctional, but not in the classic sense.
I'm considering this conversation dysfunctional currently.
So I always wondered, if you don't have ED,
we're gonna keep going.
A Viagra,
yeah.
Do you just get a rager or what?
I don't know. Wasn't that a Jackass stunt? Wasn't there a Jackass stunt involving Viagra?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know.
Does that
maybe I'm just thinking of a Tosh joke, Daniel Tosh joke.
Yeah. I've often wondered if anybody out there has tried it. Let me know. Very curious.
Yeah, I bet you spent a lot of time.
I want to know all about your erection.
Yeah.
Just tell me everything.
Every
about
detail
it.
Down to the vein.
Every detail. Every vein. Wow. So I hope you have a story for us, and this show does ramp up eventually. So this is part 2 of our trilogy.
Yes. This is part 2 of a trilogy.
The trilogy is now called, roughly, at least a working title,
8-bit systems from a 2-bit podcast.
Yeah. I like that.
We had a very productive call today.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the best brainstorming session we ever had.
So today, we're going to be talking primarily about Nintendo.
Oh, I thought that would be number 3.
No.
Interesting.
It isn't. Dumbass.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I know.
Oh, excuse me. Speaking of Nintendo, I'm just going to tune out here. play some Tetris on my handy Switch.
Oh, funny.
Fantastic little device.
Yeah. So Nintendo was founded, as we've actually discussed on this podcast before, it was founded in 1889 when Jack the Ripper was still active, by Fusajiro Yamauchi. I'm going to do my best with a lot of Japanese names during this, and just know that I'm doing my best. He was selling Hanafuda cards.
Hanafuda cards?
Hanafuda cards.
Hanafuda.
Yes. What's a Hanafuda card? I'm glad you asked.
I didn't.
I'm so glad you asked, Kevin.
I didn't.
I've got an explanation ready to go because you asked so nicely.
All right.
I think in the 1600s or so, Norwegians.
Sorry, I thought your explanation was going to be an explanation, not I thought.
Yeah, somewhere.
We were going to
there.
go with some facts. Okay.
No, Norwegians introduced playing cards to the Japanese, and Japanese people loved them. And the people in charge there immediately banned them because they didn't want foreign influence. So to get around this, they made their own cards, and their cards had, 4 seasons instead of 4 suits, and they had 12 months instead of 12 cards. So they were functionally the same thing. And then those got banned too. But in 1899, they were becoming legal again. So this Fusajiro Yamauchi character creates this company called Nintendo. I've seen varying translations of what that means. One translation is "leave luck to heaven," but apparently, according to Wikipedia, my high-level sources, that could also easily be translated as the Temple of Free Hanafuda. So, who knows? Initially,
you don't.
He was. What's that?
I said you don't.
Initially, he was very successful, and then business dried right up because really, how many decks of cards does a house need? 1, right? Maybe 2. And then you're not running to the store and buying a new deck of cards every week. But you know who does use cards, go through decks of cards very frequently is casinos. You got it. So he made a deal with casinos. And then he made a deal with the tobacco regulator in the country because I think they treated at the time, maybe they still do, tobacco like we treat liquor in Ontario, where there's a kind of a state-controlled board that operates shops to distribute it. He got his cards sold in those shops too, and by doing that, he started to build himself a pretty sizable supply chain and manufacturing apparatus. In 1929, so this is, 40 years later, his son-in-law, Sekiro Kaneda, took over and was
I say Kaneda.
Yeah, Kaneda took over, and he was a good steward of the same business strategy. But his health started to decline in the 1950s. He wasn't there, he was only there for about 20 years or so. And so his grandson, Hiroshi Yamauchi, took over. Hiroshi was a young man with very ambitious ideas compared to his grandfather. He wanted to be bigger than a playing card company. So he did some things right away. He consolidated a lot of their manufacturing. He fired a bunch of the old guard and brought in a bunch of young, savvy people. And he started trying a couple different business ventures to supplement this, this business that he had. One of the ventures that they tried was a pay-by-the-hour love hotel.
Hold up.
Yeah.
So they were pimping?
I don't think that they had their own,
So it was like you could go there as a couple. It was a no-tell motel.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Greasy.
Maybe. So after that, and other similar or other various ventures failed, he kind of looked around and realized that his biggest strength was in this kind of robust distribution system that he had. Now he just kind of had to find a sort of budding industry where having a big old supply chain was it a real advantage. And he looked around and he settled on video games. Boys.
This is what year?
This is in the early 70s now.
Okay.
So he took over in the 50s. By the early 70s, he's looking around and thinking, what else can we, what else can we be doing? He's tried some other things. He circles around to video games, and he, both coin-operated and home systems, which were starting to be a thing.
From Atari.
From Atari, from like the Magnavox Odyssey, from, there was other systems that came before that. Like Atari is actually the second generation of consoles, I think, as we went through. So he shifted a lot of the resources of his company into research and development and to, kind of get into this sort of video game entertainment production field. In 1979, they open Nintendo of America. This is after they've had a couple successful arcade games in Japan. They open Nintendo of America because they want to get into the American market, and he taps his son-in-law, a guy named Minoru Arakawa, to lead it. It was a bit tricky, apparently, to convince him to join, as Yamauchi's daughter, Yoko, who was Minoru's wife, blamed
Dating
Nintendo.
John Lennon.
Yeah, she blamed Nintendo for making her dad a cold man. But he did eventually manage to convince him to head this new Nintendo of America venture, which was primarily going to be focused on just distributing Nintendo arcade games inside of the U.S. and Canada. So in 1970, so our Arakawa moves to New Jersey from Vancouver, where he had been living. He had been living in North America, which is why he'd really wanted him in the first place. And they founded Nintendo of America, again, like I said, primarily just to distribute these arcade machines. Now, one of the first games that they imported at a mass scale was called Radar Scope. And it had initially tested very well. Put it in a couple bars. People are loving it. They ordered like 3,000 or 4,000 of these machines. And by the time the machines arrived on the East Coast, where they had initially set up, Arakawa went back into the bars where the machines had been set up, or the arcades, and noticed that nobody was playing them. And after asking around, it turned out that people thought it was fun at first, but then it wore off pretty quickly.
Just like Fast Max.
Yeah. So now they've got thousands of units that no arcade owners want, that they're not able to sell. They need somebody to design a new game basically using the same inputs, the same screen, the same, architecture. They need to be able to just swap out the motherboard and change the art. So in Japan, they tap this young man named Shigeru Miyamoto, and they put him in charge of doing that. And he goes away and, with his team of, I think, 4 people, programs this game in, lickety-split. I actually could not find exactly how long the turnaround time was, but this all happened within a year anyways. Okay. And they sent emergency conversion kits back to Nintendo of America. And Nintendo of America doesn't really know what to expect. And they take one of these conversion kits and they swap out the motherboards, and they watch as this title scrolls up the screen, Donkey Kong.
I was just going to guess that. I was going to say it's Donkey Kong.
It was Donkey Kong. And they thought, holy shit, this thing's going to be a disaster. Who's going to want to play this Donkey Kong thing? But, Nintendo of Japan had said, nope, this thing's going to be a hit. Arakawa was a good company man. He's like, nope, this thing's going to be a hit. We're going to go ahead. And actually, while they were doing that, they ended up having to rename some of the characters, or they I don't know if they had to, but they wound up doing that. They named the girl Pauline. They kept the name Donkey Kong for Donkey Kong.
Over the original names.
I didn't look that up. Oh, I can tell you one original name.
That would have made a way better segment.
Would have. But here we are.
They renamed them these names. Well, that's just the names we know.
Well, I can tell you that one, the hero was originally called Jumpman, but Nintendo of America renamed him to Mario because he looked like, or Mario, because he looked like Nintendo of America's landlord, Mario Segal. So, okay. Fun little bit of trivia for you there. The machine was absolutely an enormous hit, with an estimated $280 million in revenue for Nintendo, and a lot of people starting to notice Nintendo as like a kind of big up and coming company, and that included Universal Pictures. Universal Pictures actually got wind of Donkey Kong when Coleco licensed Donkey Kong for the ColecoVision, and when they did that, all of a sudden it showed up on a trademark search while Universal was doing some stuff, and they approached Coleco and told them, "Hey, you're infringing on our rights for King Kong, so you'd better pay us some royalties, or you're going to be faced with a lawsuit from big Universal Pictures." And Coleco didn't want to do that, so they gave in. They agreed to pay royalties. And then Universal went to Tiger Electronics because they were licensing a handheld version of Donkey Kong. Tiger wasn't so willing to budge. Now, Nintendo's lawyer, Howard Lincoln, was originally inclined to throw some money at him to make him go away. He thought he could settle it for, I think I saw between $1 and $7 million, somewhere in there. But he did some investigating and some thinking about it, and he decided they'd be better off fighting them. He thought that this was actually a shakedown, and he wasn't convinced that Universal actually owned the copyright for King Kong. So Lincoln met with Universal president, Lincoln and Arakawa, I think, the president and the lawyer, met with the president of Universal Pictures, which was Sid Sheinberg, who was a very successful attorney in his own right, to let them know that they wouldn't be paying any royalties to them, that they didn't believe that they owned the trademark, and if they did, absolutely, we'd be paying you, but we don't think you own it, so we won't. And
what a move by Universal! Like, I should find some well-off company and just be like, hey, you're infringing on my copyright, and you can buy me off for a really reasonable rate of $1 to $7 million.
Yeah, well,
which in today's money,
Universal had made King Kong movies.
Sure.
So, so Scheinberg apparently was so angry he told them, "You'd better start saving money to pay your attorney's fees. I view litigation as a profit center," which apparently was a quote that came back to bite him in the ass when it came down to the actual litigation. But Lincoln hired a lawyer named John Kirby, who is a famous lawyer in his own right. He had won big cases, I think, working for Pepsi, and I think actually, ironically, he'd worked for Universal too at some point. To save you all the legal drama, it turns out that Universal actually did know damn well that they didn't own the rights to King Kong. In 1975, they had litigated to prove that King Kong was public domain. So it was it was kind of open and shut. And because they had done that,
I'm saying, man, that's so greasy.
It was a greasy move. Because they had done that, Nintendo was able to countersue for damages because they had sent all the cease and desist stuff. They had contacted vendors, and they had been kind of greasy. they had they were awarded $1.8 million from Universal, nice. And then a bunch of the licensees that were licensing Donkey Kong for various consoles or whatever, who had caved and paid Universal royalties, they turned around and sued Universal back to get the royalties back. Most of them settled. So that happened.
Well, that looks good on them.
Yeah, right? In 1983, the Nintendo Family Computer launched in Japan, also known as the Famicom. That is the Nintendo Entertainment System, but the Japanese version.
Okay.
There was some drama with
the OG Nintendo console.
It's the OG Nintendo console. There was some drama with a recall, but it proved to be incredibly successful. So Yamauchi, who's the president of Nintendo of Japan, wants Nintendo of America to launch this bad boy in North America, but at the same time, the video game crash is happening in North America. So retailers are piecing the fuck out. They're saying we're not going to get burned twice, returning inventory all the time and stocking stuff that never sells. So
it's funny how that still is kind of a thing.
Sure.
How many console launch? I don't like day one consoles.
Yeah,
because they're prone to breakdowns.
Yeah, probably. So he knew that it was not a good time to try and launch a console in North America. So he held out, but getting a lot of pressure because, I'm sure they're in Japan, they're looking at this thing selling like gangbusters and being like, this is free money. Like, what are we doing? Why are we leaving this on the table? So by 1984, he could hold out no longer. They at least had to kind of gauge the market and see what it was going to be like. They didn't want to make it look like a video game console, though. They'd have to convince retailers to stock it, like I said, and retailers were shying away from anything that even looked like a console. So the original design that they settled on in 1984 was the Advanced Video System. It had a keyboard, a tape drive, 2 wireless controllers, a light gun, and a 3-octave musical keyboard.
What? That would have been way cooler.
Kind of. They tested this design out, like I said, 1984, and people did not react very positively to it. A lot of groans, a lot of eye rolls, a lot of, a lot of been there, done that, not doing it again. But there was one guy, this guy named Sam Borowski, who saw the potential. He introduced himself to Arakawa and told him he's the guy that's going to help him get this thing off the ground in North America. He knew how to do it. He knew he had a history with working with Atari. He had seen the mistakes they had made. He understood how to get around them, and he was going to educate Arakawa in the North American market and what had happened and what you need to do. So spends months kind of coaching him through this. And they came up with plans to kind of prevent some of the things that had happened. And this is still some stuff that Nintendo does today. Like, for example, anyone who tries to get Nintendo merchandise, they consistently undership. They never ship a full allotment of stock. Now,
so they were the OG supply crisis, artificial inflation company.
I mean, on one hand, it does create a little bit of demand. On the other hand, it makes sure that retailers are never, stuck with inventory they're not moving. And they're in the opposite position. They want it from you.
You know what? Hold on. I have a thought. I feel like that's why we should take more breaks with Fact Schmacks. Create artificial demand, because that's probably the only way we'll get it.
They also, realized that one of the big problems with the Atari debacle was all the third-party garbage that was out there and how quickly it had flooded the market. So they came up with this licensing chip, or this licensing system with a lockout chip, to make sure that only people that they approve, only games that they approve of can come out on the system. Yeah, you might remember back from the Atari episode, it has been a while for us.
The Chuck Wagon one and
like
all those random games.
all those random games. But Activision had, or Atari had sued Activision to say, hey, you can't put out games on our system, and Activision had lost. Nintendo was able to get around it. Atari lost, sorry. Yeah. Nintendo was able to get around that because they just physically locked stuff out and cooperated the locking mechanism, which Atari hadn't done. Things just ran onto disk, right? Yeah. Or a cartridge, and you could just manufacture a cartridge. So they also redesigned the machine to look like a VCR, which, kind of right idea, trying to disassociate themselves with video game consoles at the time. They were trying to make it look like something less like a computer, because that's maybe going too far in one direction, but more like something that belongs under a TV. That's not a video game system. So that's why it's the most boring gray box in the world. Versus if you look at the Japanese one, it's this bright red, colorful, vibrant thing. So, a grueling year turnaround time to get this thing ready, to get retailers in New York to actually carry this thing, but they managed to pull it off. They got it into stores. They launched with classic games like 10-Yard Fight and Wrecking Crew and Clue Land, but also this little game called Super Mario Brothers. And the test set them up to launch in other markets, and really the rest is history in terms of the Nintendo Entertainment System. I mean, it was the only system that anybody really cared about in that generation. They sold, I think it was only like 30 million NESs, but it was way more than any generation had sold before.
Well, I remember, I didn't have an NES as a kid. Mm-hmm. But my neighbors did, and we would always go play it, and it was such a novelty. And Mario Duck Hunt, Duck Hunt, I mean, that was a pretty interesting game, because he had the whole the light gun or whatever.
Yeah, Nintendo had been doing light gun stuff for a long time. That was their jam in Japan. Yeah. They released a ton of light gun consoles in the 70s.
Yeah, and it's so iconic. I can still hear the duck sound and the wah, 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 wah.
Now you might ask, what else was going on in the in that generation? Surely it wasn't just Nintendo, though. Was anybody else fighting for air?
Sega.
Well, so Sega had launched their Master System, and it was enough of a success to continue living, even though it didn't have a lot of, games that weren't Sega games. Atari, on the other hand, had been going through some changes, as you remember, where we left off. Atari had been split into two different companies. They were, after they'd been bought out by Warner, they had the home consumer division that was releasing the consoles, and then they had the coin-op division, which was the hardware division. The home consumer division was sold to a guy named Jack Tramiel. He's the guy who released, all the subsequent Atari systems after the 2600. He's up to including the Jaguar, and then that business kind of went defunct. The other half wound up being sold to Namco, and then was purchased by the man who Namco Japan had sent to run the company in America, this guy named Hideyuki Nakajima. And he had decided he wanted to get into the consumer games market, but he had a problem, because under the agreement with Jack Tramiel's Atari from way back when they were still part of Warner, Nakajima's Atari wasn't allowed to release home console games. They could only release arcade games. So it was a really weird arrangement that they had. But no biggie. Just make a new subsidiary and sell games under that name. So they formed Tengen and released games as Tengen. So this is, the Atari that has the rights to, classic Atari games, Pac-Man, all the classic arcade games that they made, Gauntlet, all sorts of stuff. Now, in order to be a Nintendo licensee back in that day, in order to release games for the console, you had to submit the game to Nintendo and allow them to make any change they wanted to remove blood or religious symbols. And then you had to buy the cartridges from Nintendo. They cost anywhere from $9 to $14 per cartridge, a minimum 10,000 order. And they only allowed you to make 5 games per year. And any games you made had to be exclusive to the Nintendo system for 2 years. So that's a pretty, hugely restrictive. It puts all of the risk onto the game developers. Nintendo's getting paid either way, right?
Sure.
It's a great business arrangement for them. And you couldn't just release a game without their approval because they had a lockout chip and program to prevent anyone from, you couldn't just reverse engineer the chip that's on the cartridge, and you couldn't just reverse engineer the chip that was in the console. There was a program that was running called 10NES that was essentially kind of a bespoke algorithm that they were using, that they had copyrighted. So you could technically walk into a copyright office and look at this stuff, but you couldn't take a copy of it, and you couldn't take it take it home with you. The copyright office is kind of fun like that. And nevertheless, they agreed to the terms and they released 3 games as an official licensee. Now, Nakamura had been kind of butthurt because he had gone to Nintendo and he had said, "Hey, we're Atari, we're a big name. Surely you can cut us some sort of deal. Maybe we can manufacture our own cartridges because we're experienced in that, or maybe you can give us a break on the cost of them because, Atari's worth so much." And Nintendo had been basically, "No, you're going to get treated like anybody else."
Sure. No special treatment for you.
Exactly. So they released RBI Baseball, Gauntlet, and Pac-Man. RBI Baseball in particular was a very popular NES game. But behind the scenes, Atari scientists were working to reverse engineer the 10NES lockout. But they couldn't do it without access to the actual program. So what to do? Well, like I'd said, the program was copyrighted. You couldn't take that information out of the copyright office to work on it in any substantial way. But you could theoretically take that information out if it was subject to litigation. So they forged documents saying that they were in litigation revolving around these patents, got access to it illegally.
What?
And then they were able to reverse engineer this lockout.
Wow.
And started, So they had reverse engineered it. They made their own program called Rabbit that could run off unauthorized games. And just as this is happening, there was a chip shortage that hit in the late 80s.
Oh.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Then too?
Yeah.
And
did
the
happen to
prices
them.
get stupid?
So Nintendo, who makes all the cartridges for everybody, has to tell everybody, well, you're not getting as many games as you'd ordered because it's harder to get the chips for it. Atari goes to them and says, "Hey, what if we find our own chips? Can we just give them to you and you can make our games so we can at least meet our quota here?" And Nintendo said, "Well, pay the difference, and as long as they pass our rigorous standards." So they found a source of them in the U.S. somewhere, and they sent off some samples, and Nintendo just said, "Nah, not up to our standards." Denied them, which was maybe a dick move. I mean, I don't know the whole story there. But in December of 88, Atari and /Tengen had enough. They sued Nintendo for $100 million for antitrust violations. And at the same time, they sent out their own unauthorized games to retailers. And you'll know a Tengen game if you've ever seen one because they're a black cartridge and they've got they're kind of more rounded in a weird way.
Okay. I didn't know that was a thing.
That was a thing. They wound up releasing like a dozen unauthorized games. Nintendo starts, threatening retailers saying, "Hey, if you start carrying any of these guys' games, we're going to pull our inventory for you. Maybe your shipments will get disrupted. Maybe they won't wind up anywhere." And retailers were very afraid of Nintendo because at the time. So Atari filed an injunction saying Nintendo shouldn't be able to do that. A judge said, "Sure, yeah, totally. You guys should not be able to interfere with each other's customers." For some reason, Atari was like, "Oh, no. We should totally be able to interfere with their customers." And so they contested that injunction, and then the judge just threw the whole thing out. So Nintendo kept just threatening retailers to pull their products. But
Dude,
it did.
Some of these 10-gen games are fantastic. Paperboy.
Yeah, because they're all Atari games.
Yeah. Paperboy, Tetris.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. I didn't realize that those were...
The first version of Tetris.
I didn't realize those were hot.
Mm-hmm. Those were, yes, unauthorized. Now, eventually, all the lawsuits came to a head, and 10gen lost because while they'd stolen the plans, and Nintendo was able to prove that they had stolen their specific design. There had been a revision that they had made after they'd filed the copyright, but that the unnecessary code was still in the 10gen games. There was also apparently other functions that weren't just specific to running the game that the 10gen chips were doing. So it was.
Were they the original collecting your data and spying on you cartridges?
No. You need an internet connection for something like that.
I know. I'm kidding.
Actually, so yeah. Eventually, yeah. They fought. They fought the good fight. Really, as consumers, we probably should have hoped that they won, but they didn't. They did get Nintendo to drop its exclusivity policy, so games would come out on other consoles, sooner, if not simultaneously. So that was a good thing heading into the 16-bit era. It also, even though they lost, their case did enshrine the right to reverse engineer things. So basically what the case said was, to the extent that you actually reverse engineered anything from scratch, great. You totally should be able to do that.
Yeah.
But you can't steal things from the Copyright Office to to get the rest of the way there.
Yeah, that's a little rough.
Yeah, Atari had to pull all their Nintendo games off of shelves. So
so they're huge
in a more real way, they lost.
Now.
What's that?
They're probably big collector items.
To a certain extent, I think.
To the right person, I guess.
To the right person, anything's a collector's item. They did go on to make a bunch of games for Sega's hot new console that had just come out right around the same time, which was the Genesis. But the 16-bit wars are a story for another day.
That's another trilogy.
That's another, yeah. So that's as far as we're going to push the football here.
Okay.
So just three little kind of important moments in the 8-bit era, the 8-bit race.
By a 2-bit podcast.
The 8-bit wars, I guess. It wasn't much of a war. It was more of a stomping.
Yeah. It's funny, I think back fondly on those days, and you remember, always having to pull the cartridge out and blow on it and I can almost just feel the controller, there's that tactile kind of memory of it, the smell of it even.
I've got the Mini, so it does have a pretty convincing replication of the controller, which is not as comfortable to hold as you remember.
No. Well, I also had tiny hands back then.
Yeah, so maybe it was better with small hands. With my big adult mitts, it's no good at all.
Jabs you with all those corners.
Right? Yes.
Yeah.
Way too pointy.
Far too pointy.
Hey,
I'm kind of impressed because we've made it through pretty much the whole episode and you never abandoned me once today.
That is true.
Yeah, that's rare.
That is rare.
It's been becoming a bit, and I'm impressed. Thank you.
You didn't interrupt me very much, so you didn't give me too many times to grab a drink.
Actually, I was interested in the story for once, so I had to sit back and just take it all in.
Yeah.
Also, as I discussed before, my brain is not firing on all cylinders today.
Or any day, really.
Slow on the uptake. Yeah, but usually there's at least, 3 out of 8 going. Today it's like 1 just lagging. Oh my God, I just choked. That's terrible.
You choked on your words.
God damn this day. Well, it's pretty fascinating, Matthew.
Well, I thank you, Kevin.
I'm impressed.
do you have a closing fact to bring us home?
I do. From my newly rediscovered, you see that right there, Reader's Digest book of facts.
I'm so glad you read that because I was about to berate the shit out of you for saying see that right there on a podcast.
Yeah. So I've been having a little bit of fun with this book before we started. Opening it up, finding some things. I got a little religious fact, and it answered a question that I always had.
Okay.
The sign of the fish. You familiar with the Jesus fish?
Yes.
Do you know what the Jesus fish is all about?
It's from when Jesus turned a fish into a frog.
That's close.
A little mouse.
Not right at all.
In his hands.
I think you're thinking of like Cinderella or something.
The mouse was holding a little bug. The bug had a little. The bug had a little, just like a little fungus on it, and the fungus just embedded in it. I just nothing. It had nothing. There was no point to any of this. Sorry, continue.
Okay. I just wanted to let that happen. I just wanted to stay out of the way of that. All right. According to the Reader's Digest Book of Facts.
Yes.
Sign of the fish. Today's born-again Christians often display a sketch of a fish to show their faith. This is not because the Bible calls the apostles fishers of men. It is because the letters of the Greek word for fish, here's where it's going to get tricky. Ichthus. I should have read this better.
Oh, boy.
Ichthus. Ichthus.
Sure, it was like ichthyosaur.
Yeah. Stand for the Greek phrase Lesus Christos Theo Ulos Solter, which is Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. The symbols appear in Christian art from the 2nd century AD as a symbol of Christ and the newly baptized. So I can only imagine some ancient ass Roman wagons with like a Jesus fish on the tailgate, like the bumper, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I always wondered where that came from. I'm like, what's the deal with the fish? I don't get it.
I'm so glad after I chose to do something that centered around Japan and a bunch of names that I couldn't fucking pronounce that you came in with a fact that you couldn't fucking pronounce at the end.
Yeah, really I will say that you're better at the Japanese names than you were at the Russian ones.
Oh, that was
from Dyatlov Pass from
that
Russia
was
with
tough.
Yetis. Yeah.
That was really tough.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We hope that we are going to be coming back with some more consistent releases. And, if you enjoyed the show, be sure to find us somewhere, like us, leave us a review, subscribe, do all the things. And thanks for joining us.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Fact Schmacks.
We hope you enjoyed our show. If you want to hear more, be sure to check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/factschmacks.
Or you can check us out on Facebook or on YouTube or on twitter.com @FactSchmackedPod.
We also have a website, factschmacks.xyz, because we know you haven't had enough yet.
Sure.